Okay, all of the panels are going to need hemmed. I'll use a hemming foot to make a little hem. The first thing I'll do though is press it under with my fingernail and press it under again. And that already kind of pre-rolls it so I can put it in. In fact, what I might do is got my threads back here. I'll put like one stitch and then I can move it back in there. Alright, now I am putting in a hem. I'm using my narrow hemming foot. And each one of these panels will need to be hemmed at the bottom before I sew them together. When I use a hemming foot, I pre-crease it just a little bit with my fingernail. And I do them kind of in chain. Make sure that the satin side is to the outside. Crease it. And some days it wants to be slightly problematic in getting in there. There we go. Okay, so I've put a hem in all of the panels. And now we're going to put the panels right sides together. And I'm going to start at this end. And what I like to do is tuck that little bit, that corner down. There, you can see it. I tuck this corner down like this, and then I fold this over like that. About 1/4 inch. Like that. Okay, so we have this pinned over like this, and our seam line is going to actually be through 4 layers of fabric. It's 1, 2, and we're going to stitch there. Instead of just stitching a regular 1/4 inch seam line, we're going to fold it over and then stitch it there. stitch there. Make sure the edges are cleaned up, evened up. And I leave some thread out back so I can use it to kind of pull it through and start it. So all of these seams are going to be done folded over, and they'll be through 4 layers of fabric. It helps. Almost all of the old parasols you'll see are done like that. You don't have to do any sort of finishing on them that way. You don't need to do any like serging or anything, and it keeps that from obviously showing up in your parasol seams. You don't want them, you know, the parasols looking this obvious serged seam or zigzagged seam showing up underneath your parasol. But this is pretty much how all of the parasols that I've looked at are sewn. They have this little double folded seam. I call it the parasol seam. I really have no earthly idea what it's actually called. I'm trying to do this so you can see what I'm doing and self-video at the same time, so it's a little bit challenging. You'll notice I'm taking, you could pin it all in place like that if you wanted to. I am really bad about not pinning things, so I have a tendency to take a pin and use it like a stiletto to keep everything turned where I want it to be. Stitch and done. And I'm leaving a little thread so I can help move it through on the next stitch. So you can see that, and it puts a nice sturdy seam there. I want to point out a few things. You notice this end isn't perfectly neat. That's alright, because it's going to get covered up when I sew in this seam when I turn that under. The other thing is if you're doing parasols that are 1850s, 1860s, you're probably not going to want to do this on the machine. You're going to want to do it by hand, because they would have been probably done by hand. I am doing this on the machine because I am working on parasols for an 1870s impression, which there are absolutely very many available sewing machines at this point in time. And so I'll probably do most of the stuff I do on the machine because of the easy availability of it. Again, in the 1870s, you absolutely could do it by machine or by hand, either one you want. Take a couple of stitches. Turn this under. And you notice I stick my fingernail in there to kind of crease that over, so that we're not getting one side longer than the other. hoping my camera's catching. It's well enough for you to see what I'm doing. But I keep lining up the edges, creasing so the fold is together, and sewing through the folded edge, all 4 layers. As long as you use this parasol, it'll stand up to pretty much anything. I mean, the seams aren't going to come apart. You may break ribs and things like that, but this is a strong way to stitch. And even just doing a running stitch by hand, it's still a very strong way to sew up